Hello, and welcome to the PsychLeadership podcast, the podcast where we discuss the intersection between leadership, psychology, and what it means for your small business. My name is Luke Upchurch, and today we're going to talk about the concept leading with gratitude. First, though, let me recap for those of you that may have missed it. Our last week's episode, we talked about psychological safety. I had special guest Jason Schultz, a friend and colleague of mine. He was on the line with us. There is a video interview of that, by the way, if you check out my YouTube channel. If you want to see a couple talking heads there, you can certainly see that. It adds a little bit of emotional context because you can see the expressions on our face and things along those lines. But check that out. Building upon that idea, we talked a lot about the idea of servant leadership. And that is, it's become a bit of a buzzword in the industry, but servant leadership is really about how do we put our associates first? How do we build our success through the success of our team? And understand that if we trust in them organically, they will earn that trust. They will build upon that trust. Gratitude's kind of the same thing in terms of it being a self-feeding machine. More on that as we get into the meat here. But this is a topic that I thought through specifically because in the United States here, we're coming up on the Thanksgiving holiday. And that can be a time that is challenging for some. I look at folks that maybe came from broken families, folks that are our military community, a lot of times struggle with big holidays like this because they're used to this more of a heads down, my family is somewhere else, and I am fighting for their freedom, etc. And it kind of shifts the model when now they're at home and they're in person and they're dealing with not only the stress and anxiety that family can bring, but also the stress and anxiety of newness, of this being something that maybe they haven't dealt with for a while. And so with those things in mind, I really wanted to get into this idea of gratitude as a way to combat that. And again, the Thanksgiving holiday is really all about being aware of the blessings that you have, being thankful for them, but also concepts like assuming positive intent, for example. Those things all come into play. And going back to servant leadership, if we have this mindset going in, it helps us with things like our emotional intelligence and building a culture of inclusivity. All those things come into play. Gratitude can also help you with your own personal struggles in terms of stress levels, anxiety levels, those kind of things. So now that I've set the foundation, let's dive into the meat a little bit. So in order to practice gratitude, and we're going to build on this as a progressive model here. Before we can build it with our team, we're going to have to start with us. We have to take a little bit of self-reflection. We have to be thankful for what we have, and think through all of the positive things. It's so easy to focus on the negative. And one of the things that you'll find from a neurological stance, whether you have more positive thoughts or more negative thoughts, it actually becomes a self-feeding machine. You start to get to this cycle of, because I have bad thoughts, because I am in a dark place mentally, even positive things in my life, I take them in a negative fashion, if that makes sense. So for example, you get folks that say, well, I hate my job. My job isn't fulfilling. It doesn't do anything for me. Well, it's also putting food on your table. So if you say out loud, if you make that affirmation, I hate my job, it's not fulfilling. Well, then even when your job throws you positive things, even when your job gives you something that should be fulfilling, you've already got a negative tint on it. You already think about it in that negative light. And so you're always looking for the negative aspect of it. You never get past that. That's actually that's kind of how depression works. From a psychological stance, depression an overall mindset, and it eventually starts to rewire your brain so that everything has a little bit of a hue to it. Well, gratitude works in the opposite way. We can actually rewire our brain to think about things in a positive manner. And so when we talk about gratitude in and of yourself, I'm going to challenge you to, every time that you have that negative thought in your head, follow it up, be intentional with, well, what is the good thing? So for instance, if I tell you that my day job, I don't get to do a lot of what we're doing right now. I don't get a chance to talk about this stuff a whole lot. However, I am participating in, for instance, a national resource group. I work with veterans a lot in that role. And so in that aspect, I actually get to reach more folks in terms of building the right kind of culture that I'm trying to build, and leaning into my psychology background and organizational leadership and all those things. I get to do that with the National Resource Group that is facilitated by my job. And in terms of the scope of people that I would have the opportunity to reach, if I did this type of work just inside my day job, my scope is somewhat limited. But if I open that up to the National Resource Group, now we're exponential. Now I don't have to operate within the guardrails of my specific corner of the organization. Now I can get bigger. Okay? So challenge yourself as you think through that negative reaction. Follow it up with a positive, right? As you can see, if those of you that are looking at the video, I wear these orthopedic gloves. I struggle with psoriatic arthritis. So that's a challenge in my life, right? That's a negative thing. But on the positive side, I have a job that my hand's not working well. Doesn't really matter. We have technology this day and age that I can dictate most of my emails, and I don't have to type much. I have the flexibility to have conversations like I'm doing right now with you. So again, just add that positive piece. These aren't just buzzwords. Positivity, gratitude, these aren't just buzzwords. Studies have actually shown that through thinking this way, I mentioned before that it can help rewire our brain. What I mean is it actually impacts the hormones, the neurotransmitters in our mind and our brain, such as things like dopamine, your serotonin. We've talked about this stuff before, but it actually helps to create a better pipeline for those things. It can actually reduce stress and anxiety as well, which facilitates sleep, which facilitates relaxation. If you have better sleep, if you have better relaxation, better coping skills, now you're going to have better short-term memory. I could go on and on with this list, but as you can see, it's a self-building machine, self-feeding machine. The other thing to consider especially as we get into the winter months, and this is why gratitude is so important, why it's almost fortuitous that the holiday hits when it does. What I mean is for those of you in the United States, the holiday hits for us this year. It is the 28th of November is when Thanksgiving hits. Well, we've got Thanksgiving, and then roughly a month later, we have Christmas for those that celebrate that. And then there's New Year's on January 1st, a week after, and then it kind of drops off. We really don't have anything big going on. And so what tends to happen is folks get more shut into their home. We don't see the sun as much, so there's a lack of vitamin D. It gets dark earlier, so you wake up and it's dark outside, and you go to work and it's still dark outside, and you get done with work and guess what? It's dark outside. And so it impacts your circadian rhythm. And so with that, depression rates tend to rise, especially in the winter, especially after January. In fact, if you look at elderly care, there are more death rates in that first quarter of the year than the whole rest of the year. In fact, companies like insurance companies, for example, there is a process with most insurance companies that they will actually ramp up. Sorry about that. Insurance companies will actually ramp up their staff during the winter months because they make cold calls to members basically just to make sure that they're still alive. if we haven't received a claim or if they haven't cashed their Social Security check, those kind of things, in a certain amount of time, people start to get a little antsy. So we actually, insurance companies like the one I work for and many others out there, they actually ramp up their staff during the winter months to call folks because depression rates and shut-in syndrome and all these things get so out of whack in the winter. So that's why I'm talking to you today about gratitude. And it starts with you. It starts with challenging yourself, being intentional about having those positive thoughts. And I'll give you some more tips towards the end of the episode on how you can do that for yourself and how that translates to your team. So with that, why don't we go on and get into the team aspect, right? You're here for the leadership side. So let me dive into that a little bit now that we have a foundation set for you personally. So the concepts here, these will impact, I'm talking about your work team, but I want you to be aware that these will also impact the interactions that you have with your loved ones, with your family, with your friends. So it's all together, right? We're not really separating it. And as we've talked about, you tend to spend as much, if not more time with your work family than you do your actual. So same, right? By having this mindset, it's going to create an inclusive culture altogether. By being grateful for the contributions of your team and vocalizing that, now they want to achieve more. They want to please. They want to get that recognition. And for some people, that's all the recognition they want. So it helps to be intentional with regards to how we acknowledge our team members' contributions. And it also, these best practices for gratitude and acknowledgement of the positive things in your life, it actually sets the foundation for emotional intelligence. Because if you can step back and think about things from a different perspective and challenge your gut reaction, then it just lets you take a deep breath a little bit and not react so quickly or in some cases so harshly. So I'll give you an example. Just this past week, was dealing with a situation in my day job, and we were asking questions to another team, a team with whom we partner quite a bit, and we're often dependent one to another. And the response back from the leader on that team, essentially we were using one method of communication. I'm not going to get into the details, but we were using one method. And this person responded back and said, we're not going to use that method anymore. We're not going to respond to that anymore. If you have questions, send us an email. And I thought, okay, well, that was a little rude, came off a little harsh. And in my gut reaction, I didn't assume positive intent. I initially thought, well, he basically just gave us the polite political screw you. I'm going to do things my own way. And I almost started typing an email. I almost fired back with a, who the hell are you to dictate to us how we're going to communicate? The other method, the way that I was communicating was the preferred method, is the best practice for a company. Who are you to tell me that you're just not going to do it? Is that really an option? That was my gut reaction. Going back to practicing gratitude, I had to think through that a little bit. I took a deep breath and I thought, you know what? It's the week before Thanksgiving. I bet he is just as busy as I am. That particular day, I had literally been in meetings from the starting bell, and I had them scheduled all the way until around 5:30 in the evening. I mean, I've been so busy lately, I swear to you, I almost have to book time on my calendar to use the bathroom. And so I thought, well, if I'm that busy, he's probably that busy. And as we often do, maybe I read too much emotion into that email. Maybe that's not what he meant. And so I kind of took a deep breath and I thought, well, he's showing his do not disturb on our messaging system. So I'll shoot him a message. That setting means that he won't see it until later. Unless he's looking, he won't see it. So I shot him a quick message. Hey, can you add some more context to this? I want to make sure that we are, that we're meeting together in the right way. And I really took it from I'm seeking to understand your perspective. I'm grateful for the partnership that we have, and I don't want to step on that. And so I took it from that perspective. Well, you know what? He responded almost right away. As it turns out, his team was going through an audit this week. And so is it possible that he was maybe a little emotionally torqued up, right? That he reacted quickly to a situation. And then as we got in the discussion, I actually realized that he was doing that to protect his team. Unbeknownst to me, members of my team were actually reaching out to the same person, asking the same questions in a different channel, right? So it's kind of like if those of you that have kids, have you ever been in that situation where you tell your child to do something having no idea that your spouse has told them to do a different thing? And so now as a kid, they're like, who do I listen to, right? Both are people of authority. Who wins out? Or what if both parties are asking the same thing, right? Your boss says, hey, I need you to do a thing, and you're right in the middle of doing that thing. And then another boss reaches out and says, hey, stop whatever you're doing. I need you to do this thing. And it's the exact same thing that you were just in the middle of, that you just broke away from, right? That's what we were doing to this poor guy. And so that reaction that I received from this leader, when I sat back, when I practiced gratitude and was grateful for the relationship that we have, the partnership that we have, although it may not be perfect, we still have each other's back. And so when I stepped back and looked at it from that perspective, all of a sudden now I see, okay, he's human too. He also hasn't had a break in, forever. And like I said, he was just protecting his team. He saw a team member, one of his associates, that was getting pulled in multiple directions for the same damn issue. And so he stood up for him. Well, kudos for him. Good on him. I'm glad he did. And so because I practiced gratitude there, not only did I save the relationship, because imagine if I would have finished that first email, if I would have come at him hard, well, then do you think that the partnership would be better today? Well, hell no, right? It would have just went right down the tubes. Now the next interaction is going to be that much more difficult because I initially did not start with gratitude, therefore did not practice good emotional intelligence, and therefore screwed up the relationship. Okay? Another aspect of this, understand this actually rewires parts of our brain by practicing gratitude. And it's funny. It actually, we talked a little bit before about depression in the winter months and so on. Well, when we have, whether it's positive or negative thoughts, either way, that actually impacts the chemicals in our brain, the neurotransmitters, the hormones in our brain become used to that pattern and then perpetuate that pattern. This all happens in our prefrontal cortex, which is associated with decision-making and social bonds. And so whether we go positive or go negative, it becomes self-feeding. The further we go down that path, the more difficult it is to change. That's why towards the end of the podcast here, I'm going to give you some tips on how you can get out of your own way. Because if you've been doing this a long time, if you've been the naysayer, the negative person for a long time, it may be very difficult to pull out of that tailspin. So with that, why don't we get into some concepts here on how you can change that model. So one of the easy things to do, and I strongly recommend this, those of you that have been around for a minute, have been listening to me for a while here. This is my 11th episode, by the way. So if you've been with me for a while, you know that I'm in the Apple ecosystem quite a bit. And one of the things that Apple started, I believe it was with iOS 17, might have been 16, they started a journaling app. It's built right into your phone. I keep hoping that they'll bring it to Mac, but I digress. In any case, it's built right into your phone, and it actually recommends things for you to journal. And there's a scientific science behind this. Studies have actually shown that through self-reflection with a focus on positivity and your blessings and the impacts that they've made on your life, they help you, as I mentioned before, they help you actually maintain that. And it helps with your coping skills. So it will, over time, it's going to decrease anxiety, decrease stress, which then gives you better sleep, which then allows you to have a better emotional connection the next day so that you can do all those things over again. So consider using that journaling app if you're on the Apple ecosystem. If you're not, there are hundreds of other apps out there for journaling. I would encourage you to strongly look into the security on any of those apps. A lot of those apps are free. They're free because you basically give up your firstborn child in the privacy agreement. So be aware of that. That's one of the reasons why I like Apple's, is that the information lives on your device and cannot be accessed outside of that device. So it's incredibly secure. But if you're journaling the way that you should, you're probably getting into some personal details and things like that. So security is a good thing. The other option, of course, is pen to paper, and these are also good. The reason that I like the digital format is, and I'm a nerd like this, but I like to refer back to things. So by having it in a digital format, because it is typed, the words are then indexed, meaning you can search. If you write it down in a physical journal, well, sure, you can flip through the pages, but would you remember exactly when you wrote that thing or had that interaction? Well, maybe not, right? But in any case, journaling has been proven to help you with those coping skills. It actually also helps with short-term memory. If you journal just before bed, anytime that you do something in terms of cognitive development, whether that's studying, whether that's any sort of left brain activity, especially, your brain will convert that short-term memory that you just created into long-term memory when you sleep. So doing this right before bed is a great way to reduce stress before bed, to increase the efficacy of your sleep, to pull it into your long-term memory. And depending on what you were journaling about, that might actually be a good thing, right? Might be a good thing to remember and to process and kind of get those emotions out before you hit the sack. So think through that. Definitely a good practice to do. I've only recently started myself, but I can tell you it definitely helps from a self-reflection. It also helps with ideas like processing that emotional intelligence. Okay, so some things to consider there. Another good best practice, and this is something I actually have calendar invites that I tried to do this. I have aspects that I'll do once a week and some that I'll do once a quarter. But what I'm getting to here is actually writing a note to a person expressing your gratitude. So I want to be clear, you don't necessarily have to send this. The act of writing it gets a big chunk of the psychological benefits. Giving it to somebody else will actually help you feel better, and it has benefits for them that you'll never fully understand. But my point is that by writing a note of gratitude to somebody in your life, whether that is a coworker, an employee, your spouse, your kids, that carries weight to it. Some employer groups will actually do, I worked for a team not too long ago. They actually had a kudos board, a digital bulletin board, if you will, that you could write just a quick little note, hey, so-and-so, thanks for your help with that project last week. Couldn't have done it without you. Or, hey, thanks for staying late or working on Sunday, or just whatever it was. But just being thankful for somebody, in a lot of cases, just for doing their job, but because they did their job, you can do your job. It's still a good idea to recognize them. And again, these aren't participation trophies. This isn't just lip service. You have to actually mean it to get the value out of it. So I want to be clear. I've seen folks that, like on those kudos boards, that employees, if an employer enforces that, If an employer incentivizes that in some way and says, well, we'll give a prize to the person that writes the most, well, of course your quality goes down, right? So you have to mean it. It isn't just checking a box, but if you take the time, and again, I used to set a calendar invite every week that on Friday, I would take a time to really reflect. Who made my life easier this week? Who impacted our customer, whatever that end customer is? Who impacted them in a positive way this week? Who made the fact that we work as long as we do, who made that bearable? And I just write them a quick little note. Now, my current team, we don't do that. That's not to say that, let me rephrase, we don't have a kudos board. It's not to say that we don't take the time to do that. So just last week, I had 2 associates that I work with on the regular that really went above and beyond. They saved a damaged relationship by giving just over-the-top white glove service to this team. And it made my job easier. And so I took the time to send them an email. I copied their boss on it and just, hey, thanks for being you. Thanks for doing this. Because you did this, this is the impact it had on me. This is the impact it had on the customer. And by sending that to them, it's twofold. So that made me feel good about things, right? That reduced stress and anxiety in my own life by practicing gratitude. But I guarantee you that it sat well with them. I mean, understand, you have to have a relationship, right? If the random guy down the street knocks on your door and says, nice lawn, maybe you care, maybe you don't, right? But because I had an established relationship with these other leaders, I hope that it carried weight with them. I hope that it made them smile just a little bit, that they understood what their work means to me. Now, another thing that I would encourage you to do, and the kudos board or just sending a quick email, that's one thing. This goes back to that leader aspect. A couple times a year, preferably once a quarter, but at least twice a year, write a handwritten note to all of your staff, each and every one of them, and just say thanks, right? If your team is functioning on any level, their existence means that you were working less. You feel that when they take time off. You feel that when they are sick, when they're on vacation. You know the value that they bring, even if they are just doing their job. And again, this isn't a participation trophy. We're not trying to blow smoke up their ass. We're just trying to acknowledge the work that they do and be genuine about it. The reason that I say handwrite these notes is because, especially in my line of work, IT is technology. It allows us to get around this stuff really easy, right? I can use ChatGPT or Apple AI or, Siri or whatever. I can use that to quickly spit out a note that sounds halfway genuine. But then I'm just checking a box. It will benefit them if they believed it, or it could actually damage the relationship. If they feel like that you're just checking a box, that you're not actually practicing gratitude, but you're doing this because your boss told you to do this, you're doing this because maybe your boss listened to me and they said, hey, that's a great idea, you should do this, and now you're like, oh crap, just another thing I've got to do. And so now you go to ChatGPT and you say, well, tell Susie that she does a great job, that I appreciate her. Well, now Susie believes that you just dialed this in, that it wasn't real, it wasn't genuine. And so you've actually had the opposite effect. Remember, we talked about both positive and negative thoughts feed one another. If your team member already didn't have the best outlook on you or the job or the culture or the environment, well, now it's worse. Okay? So take the time to handwrite these notes. Doesn't mean they can't be digital. I actually pull mine up on the iPad. Like I said, I'm in that Apple ecosystem. I pull one up on the iPad. I went out into, if you go into Pages, there's a bunch of templates out there for greeting cards and things like that. But I just handwrite a note, and I try and make it personal. So I don't just say, attaboy, so-and-so, you did a great job. I specifically pull in, hey, that specific project that you helped me on last week, because you stayed late, because you did X, why was possible, right? Whether that's you helped me, you helped the team, you helped the relationship, or you built your own career. I mean, any of those things, you can call that out, you can be direct with it, and that's going to help them understand the value that they bring. So again, you don't actually have to send these. Writing them will help. You can even write it in your journal that we talked about. I've even seen folks that will write out a letter to, say, a person that has passed, expressing the gratitude for what that person did for your life, right? So you can even do that as a means to help cope. It has the same types of psychological benefits, but if you want it to have extra punch, pop that in the mail, throw it in an email, send it in a text, send it in a damn smoke signal. But one way or another, make sure that the other folks in your life know what they mean to you and how their existence makes your existence that much easier. All right, so in closing, I hope that this was helpful for you. I hope that you're able to put some of these best practices in motion in your life for your team. And I guarantee you that if you create the culture in your team, eventually I hate to keep beating the dead horse when I say it's a self-feeding machine, but I mean that from a cultural perspective too. By practicing gratitude with your team, they will practice gratitude with one another, with their customers, with their clients, those kind of things. And so it just perpetually gets better. So in closing, I did want to share, I have a couple interviews that are pending for the next couple episodes. So I plan on getting into, and I don't know the order here, but we're going to talk about change management. This is especially important as you get into the new year. Lots of teams have new strategies that they're launching, maybe organizational changes, structural changes, those kind of things. So I want to talk to you about change management. I have 2 potential interviewees that'll be on, so look forward to that. I also have a piece, I was able to get in touch with a guy who owns an AI company. He's actually building AI for small businesses. So you'll want to hear that. But he also has a background in psychology. He's actually a graduate from my alma mater, from Southern New Hampshire University. So he's going to talk to you and me about how we can build AI in such a way that it enhances the relationships as opposed to replaces them. So more to come. Enjoy your Thanksgiving, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.